Welcome, people. I'm gonna let folks get into the room and we're gonna start welcoming. Oh, all right. Yes, Sonya's already here. Let's get Sonya on.
Hello.
You on time. This is great.
I tell you, when it's digital, I figure the least I can do is be punctual. Punctual. I didn't even have to leave my house.
Yeah.
So,
This is so great. Okay. So thank you so much for joining us today. I am really excited about this conversation. You
likewise.
look like a beam of sun ray. So
Thank you. Likewise. Your hair's so pretty.
thank you. It took a long time, hours. But I wanted to give some folks a little while to join in. And before we begin, to just contextualize the conversation for folks to know about voices and why we're doing this conversation. So,
Awesome.
welcome everyone. Voices is a new interdisciplinary performance arts project and campaign grounded in Black women's stories by V-Day, which is to unify the vision of ending violence against women, cis women, trans women, and non-binary people across the African continent and the African diaspora. And our goal is to use art to embody and inspire solidarity making in our collective imagination. And we know that art has so much power to culturally shift and move our communities in the directions that we would like to see. And especially now during COVID, thinking about the ways that art has really transformed our relationships to ourselves and how we're practicing mindfulness and intention in this moment. And I am so honored to have a guest with us today who, for me, I've known for a very long time in the poetry community. And to see so much growth and so much of the work that they're doing now, and an accomplished writer and poet and thinker. And I think that she's a pivotal voice during this moment and this time. And it's incredible and powerful to see the ways that Sonya Renee Taylor has been using her voice to speak truth to power. And so Sonya Renee Taylor is the founder and radical executive officer of The Body Is Not an Apology, a digital media and education company committed to radical self-love and body empowerment as the foundational tool for social justice. Sonya has shared her work as an award-winning performance poet, activist, and educator in numerous countries and on major media outlets around the world, reaching hundreds of thousands of people with her commitment to radical self-love and transformation. Sonya continues to perform, speak, and facilitate workshops globally. And she's working on some other incredible projects that maybe she'll speak to today. But it's an honor to be in conversation with someone that's thinking through radical self-love in this post-electoral politic moment. I mean, not post-electoral politic, but post-election.
We wish it was post-electoral.
Let me be mindful with my words. My mind is somewhere else. My imagination. See, this is language.
Yes, we're in the liberatory future. We're in our liberatory imagination.
Yeah. So welcome, Sonya. Please. How are you feeling? Where are you? How are you feeling? And what's bringing you joy right now in this very moment?
So I'm feeling good. I just ate. What's bringing me joy is the ability to have an amazing conversation with you and still be in my pajamas, which is my best life. I have decided that for the most part, I'm doing all the things in my pajamas, because that is the life I'm into. And I'm looking at the sun on a stunning lake, like right outside of my chair,
Ooh.
and it's like shimmering and golden, and it's perfect.
Ah, that sounds lovely. Being in
Yeah.
nature and being present around nature is so important and crucial. I wanted to, I guess, start with, I have so many questions, so many things I want to talk to you about, so we'll try to see if my brain can contain it all. And then I want, you to feel free to share and speak to whatever you feel needs to be shared in this moment. But
Mm.
particularly right now, before we get into the electoral political conversation, I
Yeah.
just wanted to think about the fact that we are still in the middle of a pandemic, a
Hmm.
global
Hmm.
pandemic that has really transformed our relationship and our sensitivity to each other,
Yeah.
the ways that we move and the ways that we think through community and social justice and inequity. There's been social uprisings around racial injustice in our country, and you see that most of us are trying to still take to the streets, still show up for one another, still be
Yeah.
present with our physical bodies. But this virtual thing is now the new kind of way of being in the world.
Yeah.
And for someone who's thought through so much around body and our relationship to our bodies, I wanted to ask you, what are some of your thoughts around what COVID has done to shift our relationship to our bodies and the ways that the
Yeah.
virtual space has either like expanded our relationship to our bodies, transcended,
Hmm.
or
Hmm.
limited, the ways that we kind of engage with our bodies and with one another?
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for that question. It's something that I have been thinking about a lot. And I really relate to COVID as, um, and, I want to be mindful of my language because I want to be mindful of the great havoc that it has wreaked in people's lives, right? And I don't want to be dismissive or minimizing of that in any way, shape, or form. And I want to say that I believe it has also been an incredible and uncomfortable invitation. And it's been an invitation into an inquiry about what do we want, right? Like, I feel like COVID has given us the opportunity to say, what actually is the relationship I want with my body? Because I can have a fear-based, detached-based, disembodied, disempowered relationship with my own being and with the being of others. Or I can have a relationship that is about embodiment and care and connection and and how do we both deepen our understanding of the word body and expand our understanding of the word body so that we might figure out how to be better connected with one another. I think COVID has given us an option. Which one do you want? Because you can have either of them in this moment. You can have total fear, total disconnection, total isolation. You could have that. Or you could have how does, because I think there's this interesting dance between the difference between isolation and solitude, the difference between protection and care, right? Like that there is a way in which my staying physically away from your body is a deep and loving act of care, right? And that we could receive that. We could show up, and because when I show up to it from that way, then that's actually connection inside of that. But when I show up from this is me isolating and this is me needing to protect myself, then what that does is it creates both physical distance and energetic and spiritual distance, right? And so I feel like we are at choice, much like Music Chairman just said. We are at choice about how we want to be embodied in this moment. Do we want to be embodied from a place of care and connection, or do we want to be disembodied and disconnected from that place of fear? And I think both are an option right now. I'm choosing love and care. That's what I desire, you know.
What are ways that you have possibly had to push through the feelings of isolation? And even because I think it's kind of, we try to be mindful and say, okay, I'm going to push through and think about love and care, but still not being able to physically touch the people we love and care about,
Yeah.
transforms our sense of self-worth, our insecurities, our ideas about our identity.
Yeah.
And so I think it's also useful to speak to the challenge and the difficulty of that, and what are ways
Absolutely.
that maybe you've been able to think through or push through those challenges.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's been, when quarantine first happened, when lockdown first happened, I was in New Zealand. And I was, yeah, many things happened all at the same time in my life. My dog died, my relationship ended, then we went into a 1 month lockdown. My partner moved out, and so I was in a home where I thought I was going to be hosting retreats for people, alone, completely alone and isolated in the middle of this pandemic. And yeah, and all the fear, all the fear of about all the things, about will I ever be touched again? Like, will I ever? Literally, I was like, oh, I'm just never, nobody never gonna touch me again. It was terrifying, right? It was absolutely terrifying. And then what I really like, for me, thank God for therapy. I just want to shout out Dr. Bronte, my therapist, who has been so instrumental in helping me learn how to ask myself the kinds of questions that really let me get to the bottom of things. Because what I got to ask myself is like, what's underneath that fear, Sonya, right? Like, what's underneath? Because this is the painful, most uncomfortable truth ever, but it was the absolute truth when my therapist said it, is like, to some extent, no matter how well you orchestrate your life, you will die alone. Because the act of death is a singular thing.
Yeah.
You will. So if that's your biggest fear, go on ahead and accept it. Like, if, and I said this the other day in a What's Up Y'all video, is like, the invitation is to get closer to the thing I'm afraid of. And that was really what I was given at the beginning of that lockdown, was like, here are all your fears. You're going to die alone. You're going to never be touched again. And if all of those things are true, then what?
Yeah. Who am I then? Yeah.
Who am I then? Who am I then? And the truth of the matter was, I was like, I'm still the same chick. And what, there's a quote from Dr. Michael Beckwith that has been also really, really helpful for me over the years. And it's like, if this situation were to never change, what quality would need to arise in me to have peace and power? Should the external situation never change, what qualities need to arise in me in order to have peace and power? And that was the question. I was like, well, for me, the qualities, I may not be able to be touched physically, but what do I need to touch in the immaterial realm that makes me feel closer to myself? So I was like, oh, well, me and my ancestors gonna have to get real, 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 real close, because I can't touch nobody else.
I've been saying that the botanicas and the spiritual workers and the healers, man, they are what do you call it? Essential workers, right now.
Essential workers, essential workers, right? Because what we were given was a halt in our material world, a halt in the physical realm, right? And part of that, I deeply believe, was necessary, because it's the place we over-identify with. It's the place that we think that is the thing that we must control, right? And that if we control the material and physical world, then life will be whatever it is we imagine it's going to be, which lives inside. That's a white supremacist capitalist delusion, right? The actual thing we only have control over, right, is our own internal process, right? And the only control we have over that is to get to know it, to honor it and be present to it, right? And so it was this opportunity to stop over identifying with this part of the world, this part of my construction of what life is, and to start to get closer to that, which I've not been paying attention to, which is, what is my spiritual journey? What is my personal journey? Who am I outside of all these other externalized things? You know, which is, for me, it is the work of radical self-love, right? It's like, okay, if it ain't none of that outside stuff, then it must be an inside job right now. Okay, what do I do with that?
I think that's really powerful too, because a lot of times we talk about self-love as if it's this individualistic, self-centered thing, whereas a lot of what I think has this moment created was the kind of extension of a Black feminist politic, which is around the personal is political. And so if you are centering and if you are working on you, the world can start to shift to the place that it needs to be. And still, I think we're starting to see so much, it's like unveiling the blinders, the rose-colored glasses that a lot of people had. So we assume that there's like the end of the world because things are you know, coming uprising. But it's like cleaning out a wound, right? Like if you have to get rid of the pus, you know, stuff is going to come up, and it's going to need to, you need to clean that out in order to deal with the healing. I think that you have been able to use this moment to really speak to the power of voice and also listening. So I think when people hear you, a lot of times they might think that, oh, she's really good at speaking and she's really good at saying things a certain way that can really hit me. But I think sometimes what I learned even with poetry is that people think you have all the words because it comes to you naturally. And I think sometimes it takes a real, what you've been talking about, a deep listening to the self. And I wanted to ask you, what has been your journey with finding the language for the way that you orient the world in your heart and in your mind and in your space? Because it seems that you have really done something profound in being able to communicate hard, complicated issues and distill them down to in ways that folks can get it very simple and plain. You've been able to make it plain, as the way that I think Malcolm X would say before he went on stage, right? Was how do you make it plain for people to really get to it? And so I wanted to know what has been your journey with language and finding the language to communicate during this moment.
Yeah, I think that so much of the very beginning of my journey with language comes from my mother. You know, like, it was, as soon as you asked me that question, I was like, oh, that's Terry. I so adore my mother for her deep willingness to let me get on her whole nerves with questions, like, and that my mother always taught me. My mother said all the time, it is not what you say, it's how you say it, Sonya. And so I was allowed to challenge as long as I could come up with a way to challenge that didn't get me popped in my mouth, which was a delicate dance, right? So there was always this permission to use language in the most precise way. And my mother had a 10th grade education, so she also wasn't interested in you coming to her with a whole soliloquy of, you know, encyclopedic words. That was not how you say it if you wanted to get her to listen. And so thank you for shouting out Miss Terry. Yes. And so I had very young practice of learning how to make it plain, make it clear, and to make it honest. And my mother instilled that in me in a very specific way. And then, you know, I always loved words, but then when I met poets and I started reading poets, and I was like, oh, people just be out here just talking, like just giving beautiful words all the time. I was so enthralled, and I so wanted, I was like, I want to know how to do that. And so I was like, oh, well, I'm just going to immerse myself in this world with these people who have this particular toolkit, and I'm going to sit at their feet and I'm going to ask them questions like I would ask my mama, and I'm going to, and so that process of just both like the guidance from my mother and the like magic of poets, those two things together, I feel like are the way that the way I desire to communicate. I want it to be beautiful, and I want you to get it. I want you to get it if you had a 10th grade education. I want you to get it if you got 7 PhDs. Like, how can we, how can we all get it? How can we all get it? And that, to me, is what I most want to convey when I'm trying to communicate with folks.
I think it's easy in this moment to want to kind of always place blame on others about what we're experiencing. And I think about the ways that language has been weaponized against our communities, particularly, Black and brown and poor marginalized communities. And that, I think that's something that number 45 does really well, actually, is using language in a way that's kind of so manipulative that people don't really even know what they're saying, but they're attributing to the feeling of what they're saying. And so I wanted to know, what do you think is the responsibility of truth telling now, and language and literacy in our communities, particularly around Black women's imaginations for what language can do? Because I think there's so much history for what we've been able to do with language, and yet it has not been studied, and our education system has failed our kids miserably across the globe. This isn't just, in the States, but particularly here. And I wanted to know what are the things that you that inspire you about the ways that Black feminists have used language, and the ways that they've imagined maybe some women that you call on or speak to or feel like you're in conversation with, even if it's psychically. And then what is that? What are the things that we need from those lessons right now that we probably aren't paying attention to?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so with you that the level of disservice that just white supremacist delusion engages in as a way of disconnecting us from our source knowledge and the way in which we communicate that, right? And the beauty of Black story, right? The beauty of Black storytelling, and the power of I always knew, like, regardless of whatever my orientation religiously was, I was always clear that my grandmother was a casting a spell when she prayed, right? Like, it was, I always knew that, right? I was like, oh my, that's gonna happen. Whatever that was, she just said that's gonna happen, right? And that's always been the truth of whatever it is that I have heard come from Black women's bodies throughout history, and Black women's voices throughout history, and the ability to communicate without language, right? To communicate. My mother could tell me whatever she wanted to tell me, and that lived right up in these 3 quarters of her whole face right here. And it was 6 books, right? It was 6 books in 5 minutes. I just read them all. Yes, ma'am, went to go clean my room, right? Right? And so how do we take back the multitude of our languages, right? How do we take back the vastness of our storytelling? And I think that, we'll be waiting forever if we're waiting for the external system to legitimize that, right? And so how do we legitimize it for ourselves? How do we code it? Because again, that's one of those things where it's like, right, I don't necessarily have to think of my mother's eyes and eyebrows as a language, but they indeed were. And we know that. So what does it mean to drop into that knowing, and then to intentionally yield that, right? To intentionally move with that. I think that's the, that to me is one of the things that's really ripe in this moment, is the opportunity to do that. And then of course there's always still the, profound beauty and grace of Black language. I probably 7 times a day I quote Lucille Clifton. 7 times a day I say, won't you celebrate with me that every day something has tried to kill me and has failed, right? And how that is an ocean worth of content in under 15 words. And ain't none of them words more than 2 syllables, right? And that is the kind of depth that lives has always lived inside our words, have always lived inside our mouths, have always lived inside the stories of Black women and femmes and non-binary folks, and has always lived there. This is in this language of decolonization. When we decolonize how we understand language, how we understand the word, then it opens us back up to the access of the volumes and vastness of our own storytelling.
When do you feel like someone has used words to build you up or to tear you down? When are moments that you feel like you have experienced the intention? And I think I know that you probably experience even more now that your platform has grown. And what are the ways that you kind of redirect that energy? If we're talking about it in terms of spell casting, I think because so many of us are on social media, we internalize language in a different way. And we see words as this means to an end. It's just a transactional relationship. And we don't actually hold weight to what the words are doing. Twitter has made it so that 120 characters, we get it down and that's it. So what are ways that you feel like, almost like Tai Chi, like where you just like swerve the energy, because words are energy and they do things. So I wanted to wonder, what are some of your practices around shifting the energy around word usage or word work?
Yeah. So, it's been really interesting. I feel like I've had a recent example of this where, I gifted myself a car, and most people celebrated with me, and it was really beautiful. But there are a few people who was not particularly happy about my vehicular choice. And some of those were comments, they were words that I was willing to, like, let's be in a conversation with them. And some of them were very clearly words that were meant to diminish me, right? And that were about, who do you think you are, right? And what I'm learning to do, what I've been practicing doing, is when am I outside of my own integrity by offering a response? When am I outside of the realm of my own humanity through the act of trying to validate myself through language to these people who clearly use some language to cut me down and tell me how I wasn't this or that or the other? And in that moment, I was like, right, the practice right now is that the practice is to withdraw my word from these people who are not worthy of it. Right? It is the old school, don't cast our pearl amongst swine, that kind of thing, right? But it was very much like, right, if language is an exchange, then this exchange, I have a choice about whether or not to be in this exchange, right? If language is an energetic exchange, I can't stop this energetic exchange right now. And that is by being very, very clear that I don't actually owe you a response, right? And that leaving you to the freedom of your own story is an act of liberation on my part. That is me gifting myself liberty. And so that's one of those moments, right? For me, as a person who I love to talk, right? I love to talk. I love to answer questions. That's my favorite thing. And so, and historically, I'm a slam poet historically. I like to compete. So I was like, oh, we're going to compete with words? It's like, oh, that's an invitation. And yes, Amber, leave them on red. And these days, I don't even want to leave you on, I want to leave you on unread. I want to leave you on, that I'm so energetically attuned to what isn't aligned with me that I don't click on the thing that ain't aligned with me. And that is one of those, for me, that's one of the things that I've been practicing is for me, the work is when to withhold my word. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. We have a quote that we've been sharing. Hi, everyone who's joining in. If you're just joining in, just letting you know that we are talking about all things Sonya, magic, power, words, spell casting, beyond social media, this political moment, all those things. As a part of Voices, this is a project that we're trying to gather and garner as many Black women voices as possible. So please go to visforvoices.com and submit. We want to hear your stories. There are prompts on there about so many different things that we want to instigate and incite your storytelling. And so as we're talking through storytelling, one of the things that I loved is I read the Barracoon story of Zora Neale Hurston. And in the introduction or the foreword, Alice Walker writes, those who love us never leave us alone with our grief. And I've been thinking about this so much in the past few weeks, just thinking about as we use the word solidarity, as we think through what solidarity looks like, as people post up, different things that they think gesture towards their values. What has solidarity looked like to you in the flesh, in the practice, in the actual movement in your life? And how do you feel like that has transformed the way that you've seen the issues that you've struggled with? So as we think through, those who love us never leave us alone with our grief. Grief is something that we're experiencing so much right now. And so it's very easy to say, oh, that's them, that's their issue, that's what they're struggling through. How do we embody a collective sharing of the experience and a collective doing in the change that needs to happen?
Yeah. So juice, you out here with these juicy questions, Aja. They juicy.
That's just me being too nervous. I was like, I gotta give good questions to her. I gotta give her the good stuff.
I was like, these questions, yes. I have to dig in. I'm good though. I'm good. I ate. I feel like I did some reps today. I'm ready. Solidarity for me. This piece about grief, I'm so it's really interesting. I am very, very present. The 8th anniversary of my mother's passing was on October 19th. And so I have been very much in her energy. And yesterday I was like, oh, here's a new layer of grief, right? It was this thing that was really present for me. And so my mama just very clearly wants to be in this interview, so she gonna be here. And the thing that I thought about is, so when she passed, I was in San Antonio, Texas, and I was there participating in a racial justice and education conference. And I was there with one of my life loves, Maureen Benson, who is a brilliant educator, and someone who I consider like my sister in solidarity, a white woman who does the work. And who does the work on a daily basis. And for me, if you're going to be a white person in my life, that's actually the only way I'm interested in keeping them kinds of confines with white folks, is white folks who are actually daily inside of the work. And when I got this call, what I know is that I got a phone call that my mother wasn't alive anymore. And then I got on a plane. And all the things that need to happen in between that phone call and my body being on a plane were things that woman, Maureen Benson, made happen. And that I can't even fully, I can't presence what was happening, right? I was like out of my mind in many, many ways. But what I know is that someone took up my care, right? And they took up my care in the moment when I had nothing to give. And for me, that is solidarity. My pickled pineapple, one of my life loves, Kay Williams often every day asks, what would care look like for you? And so for me, a solidarity ethic that cannot exist without an ethic of care. And as Kay talks about, a Black love and care ethic, because I don't actually want white people care, right? I don't want care that is constructed by whiteness because it's raggedy, because we have seen how whiteness takes care of itself. It's not very caring. And so I don't want that care. I want the kind of care that Black people have given each other throughout centuries that has allowed us to survive. That's the kind of care that I'm interested in.
Can you go deeper into that? When you say white people care and Black people care, what does that look like? What are the examples?
And when I say white people care, what I'm talking about is whiteness, right? I'm talking about the structure and construct and cultural identity of whiteness, right? And so inside of projects I'm working on, Buy Back Black Debt, with my co-founders, Kay Williams and Katarina Norden, we've developed a set of principles by which we operate. And 5 of 6 of those principles live under what Kay Williams calls a Black love and care ethic. And inside of a Black love and care ethic is care inside of whiteness requires whiteness and all of its attributes inside of it, right? So whiteness as an inherently individualistic framework, as a framework that is about urgency, that is about product over process, that is about sort of, like how much you can produce, how much you can do, right? So care inside of whiteness is always mitigated by the structures and confines of white supremacist delusion, right? So it is focused on the end result. It's focused on whether or not people, whether or not it produces something. It's focused on
in return.
It needs something back, right? It needs to be born in an urgency, because if you don't do it right now, then you'll miss some opportunity. It's born out of scarcity. It is born out of the dynamics and culture of whiteness. That's not care. It's the reason why there's a thing called the NAP ministries, because inside white care, you don't ever get to sleep. You can't rest. Literally, you can't rest inside of whiteness, right? If the whiteness tells you the care is you worked 14 hours and we gave you a quarter raise, that's care. That's raggedy. I don't want that. I don't want that, right? What I want is a care that says, I want a care that says, yes, if they sell your baby down the river, I will care for your child like she is my own. That's the kind of care Black folks gave each other in the confines of chattel slavery, right? Like the kind of care that I want, that depth of care, the kind of care where you would tuck a note inside the ribbon in your baby's hair and tell somebody, I'm not going to make it, please take care of my child. And they would raise that child as if they were their own, never letting them forget you. That's Black care. That's the kind of care I'm interested in. And so solidarity are people who say, what does care look like for you, Sonya? And I want to be really, really clear. This conversation is me. You might as well just have Kay Williams on here saying this, because this is out of Kay.
And also some of us don't know what care looks like for us. Some of us have never learned
exactly.
And I think that's why what you're doing with the Black Debt Back is actually one of the truest demonstrations that I've seen out of like collective organized around solidarity, because solidarity is a word rooted in carrying each other's debt. Carrying each other's debt and making sure that someone is free of that debt. And I think that's a way of thinking about care that's practical, material, but also emotionally. What is the emotional weights that we're carrying? What are the psychological heaviness that we carry?
Yes, and at its core, it's relational. At its core, it is that you can't clear my debt, because debt is not just monetary, right? It's spiritual, it's energetic, right? Like literally, it's to be buried under something, right? And so you can't clear my debt and not care for me, right? The debt will just become something different, right? Like, to clear my debt is to clear the energetic barrier between us. And that requires care. That requires an investment in me beyond some transactional thing where you just feel better about yourself because you hooked me up with $5. Again, things that exist inside of a care ethic and whiteness. No, right? And then it also says, like, if you don't know what care looks like, then let's take our time and sit down and figure it out. We do that first, right? So that we are not moving, that we are not moving outside of the relational first, because anything else is unsustainable. We've done all the other versions and they don't work, right? So yeah.
What do you feel like you have learned about this country's relationship to care, particularly around this election? I think that one of the things that June Jordan talks about is oftentimes how self-determination is so crucial to our liberation, and that the ways that we have been taught to think about electoral politics is, and Black people in general, is that someone's going to come save us. Someone outside of us is going to come save us and do this great thing that's going to, rid us of all the things we've ever gone through and endured. And I think one of the questions that we have to come to at this point is, like, what is our responsibility to our relationship to care? And what are the things that we're doing for each other that can transform this country and the way that we think about governing in this country? So I wanted to think about what are some of the thoughts you've been grappling with around this election, this electoral moment, in relationship to this country's ideas around care?
It's very clear that this country doesn't have any ideas around care. Well, it cares about how much it don't care about you. And this is the analogy that I've been thinking about for weeks now. It's just because what feels really, really resonant for me right now is that whatever it is that, as Alice Walker says, we are the ones we've been waiting for. And that whatever it is that we desire to see, whatever we desire to see birthed out of the ruins of this project. And let me be clear, this project is in ruins. It's if you are still trying to figure out how we're gonna save this democracy, I think you're on an assignment that is absurd and silly. That's what I believe. And because you can't save something that never existed. You can't save a democracy that never was here. You can figure out how to create one. We can figure out how to birth the thing we want, but there is nothing here to save. I have said this a bazillion times. I'll say it again. If I baked a cake, and after I baked it, I realized I put a cup of salt in instead of a cup of sugar, I can't go back and take out the salt. I can't be like, oh, damn, I gotta figure out, let me figure out how to get that salt out of that cake. You can't do it. And what we have been doing as a nation for hundreds of years has been like, how can we save the cake? How can we save the salt cake? Well, maybe if we put this icing on it, we'll save the salt cake. Maybe if we dress it up this way, we'll save if I serve it on this platter, maybe we'll save it. The cake has got to go. It has got to go. And so what I'm more interested in is not how we save what obviously deserves its own. Some things, and I know I'm not the first person to say this, but I can't tell you who said it, but I am very clear that death is often a mercy. And there is a mercy in allowing the project of the United States as it is constructed in our minds right now to die. And that things must die in order for other things to live. And if we, as a species, collectively would like to live, the project that is the United States as it has been constructed must be allowed to die. And that does not mean, and I think the reason this is such a difficult conversation for people is because they can't imagine what else would be, right? Like, we can't imagine what it would look like if it wasn't this. But I offer that we don't necessarily, that if we bring our liberatory imagination closer to the center of our own lives, then it doesn't become quite as difficult. So the thing I've been talking about a lot lately, right, is like, we all used to, I'm going to date myself right now. I grew up and everybody had VCRs. If you was balling, you had VCR, right? Now, I'm sure there's some people watching this who was like, VC what? Right? But we had a VCR. And then somebody came out with a DVD and you didn't need tapes anymore, right?
DVD.
They were like, oh, now we got DVDs. And then somebody was like, why we got DVDs when you could just put it on the internet? We could watch movies, right? And the whole world didn't have to hold the vision. One person had to hold the vision that there could be something different. And then that person enlisted a few people, who enlisted a few people, who enlisted a few people, until the new thing made the old thing obsolete. We have the ability to create the new thing that makes the old thing obsolete inside of this particular system. And that happens inside our own lives. That happens inside the communities that we are birthing. That is what Buy Back Black Debt is for us. It is, how do we make, I don't know how you, the only way I know how you topple capitalism is to figure out how to do something different. I'm about to practice how to do something different right here in my little sphere of influence. And should it be powerful enough and interesting enough that people want to join on, and people are doing this everywhere. So it's not just me. We see people doing this. If we collectively create our own liberation inside our lives, we make what this society has given us, a VCR, not useful anymore and not needed anymore. And that is what I want to see us collectively do in this moment. This government will do whatever it's going to do. What can we be doing in the practice of our own lives, inside of our own communities, families, networks, to build the world we want to see in tiny daily ways in our own lives? And the collection of that activity is what the new world looks like.
Mm. Girl, I can't. That was such a word. I like, my whole, just restructured my whole spirit.
Yes.
So what's next? What are the things that you feel like, the ways that you feel like you're inspired? What are things that you see that are practicing radical love in action in terms of how we're organizing with each other? Because I think the assumption is that we are not, that all these things are happening and so that we're not effective, that we're not winning. But I think the fact that things are happening, being torn apart and dismantled, shows that we're winning. It shows that there are new imaginations arising up in this moment. And so I think because social media, and also I want to say, like, there's a lot of conversations in our movements that we're not having about technology and where technology is going. One of my friends, we were on this new app called Clubhouse or something, and
I've heard about it.
Yeah. I need to get you on there, but I don't need to get you on there because the last 2 weeks it's gone crazy. So I had a friend who was on there. He's an organizer, Steve Pargett, and he said, in the beginning, these conversations we're sitting with, like, some of them sometimes venture capitalists or people that are creating new apps that are, doing all these things. And he said, this is so incredible. Some of the most genius minds of my generation, young black people, should be in these rooms, should be having these conversations about shaping the future. But they're still busy trying to organize to stop the police from killing us. And I think about how often we're left out of the political, creative, material imagination of our futures because we're still so busied with whiteness's mythological, terroristic identity crisis.
Right.
And so the ideas of the future do not write us, do not include us. So I wanted to know, what are the radical imaginative futures that you see are being organized around right now, and the love and care that we need during this moment?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for that. So I think that, I mean, I continue to be profoundly moved by what it is that we are able to create inside of, this, inside of a nightmare, right? Like inside of what is often a nightmare. In that, what I know to be true is that what I know to be true is that right now, the words that major political parties have to contend with the idea of defunding police. That's what I know. In a world where that was unfathomable. I would say it was unfathomable 6 months ago.
Yeah.
That any major political anybody would be on stage talking about, you want to defund police. It was not even imaginable. And that is where just inside of one of the principles inside of Buy Back Black Debt is Blackness as technology, right? And inside of that principle is the idea that we code technology as these, venture capitalists and making virtual reality and all of these sorts of other things that are indeed an aspect of that. But what is beyond, to me, the technology I'm the most interested in is the kind of technology that allows Black people to still be here, innovating, creating, pushing forward culture, conversation, and politics after 400 years of daily attempted annihilation. That's the technology that we ought to be tapping into. And so I have less conversation about what everything we do is technological. The fact that 500,000 people got themselves through a quarantine because a Black man was like, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna get on Instagram and use this technology to DJ parties in people's homes. And D Nice and Club Quarantine saved the collective mental health of probably half of society. That is technology. That is the technology of using the gifts that are intrinsic inside of us to catalyze not only our survival, but our thriving inside of conditions that would have us be annihilated. That's technology. And so my question is, why are you, Mr. Virtual Reality dude, not over here being like, yo, what do I need to do to get on your shit? That's the conversation I want to have. I want to figure out, and so we're not in these rooms, but we're not in these rooms because those rooms are still wedded to their own white supremacist delusion. Because if they were not, we wouldn't have to be in those rooms. They would be beating down our doors, right? And so again, what I'm more interested in is, actually, I don't want you know what you could do? You could go on ahead and take that seed money, that A round and B round money that you was going to do, and you come over here and fund this technology that's been changing the world. Yeah. We are the technology. Yeah. Why don't you take your venture capitalist funds and put your money over here? That's what I'm interested in seeing happen. Because we're already doing it. We've been doing it.
Yep.
You know?
Well, we're coming to a close, and this is so unfortunate.
Devastating.
It's so unfortunate because this is like, I got so many more questions, and you have so many good, meaty answers, and I'm so grateful for them, because we're, a lot of times in these moments where you're trying to have conversations with people, people still leave hungry, and I hope that everyone that is following is leaving fed, and whole and held and understood in this moment, in this time, and less alone, a little less alone. Yeah. Sonya, you've been doing such incredible work on connecting the dots and pushing people through mental blocks and barriers and the interior work that needs to happen. And so I'm grateful for the radical imagination that you are igniting in folks. In this moment, you're an inspiration. And so to the Black women who are following and who will watch and look and listen to this conversation, I hope that you are inspired and that, someone has been thinking you up. Someone has been waiting for your story to be shared. Someone will be freed through your story being shared, just as Sonya is freeing us. So we invite you to tell your stories, to submit your stories at visforvoices.com, to follow Vias for Voices on Instagram. We will be doing more conversations. This is a listening tour, so we're grateful that you all listened, and I pray that it gives you a little bit more resource for listening to yourselves during this time, learning to listen to yourselves and tune out the rest of the world with the noise sometimes.
Yes.
And Sonya, is there anything else you would like to leave the people with during this moment, particularly anything you would like to share with Black women and those who choose to be in solidarity with us?
Yeah, like, one, please be a part of this project. Please share your stories with Vias for Voices. You know, we can't have a conversation about it, what it means to elevate the genius that is the technology that is us, without capturing it. And here is this place, here is this beautiful gift of platform to capture these stories. And so I really, really hope that people will step up and participate with that. I love y'all, and I'm so great, and I love you, and I'm so grateful that you asked me to be in this conversation. It has been an utter delight. Well, I mean, I've known you since you was a good little teenager, and so it has been an utter delight watching you blossom into such a brilliant, brilliant woman. And I'm so grateful to keep being in this with you.
Yeah, I'm glad you're in this universe.
Get to the finish line,
Yeah, I'm glad you're in this universe, in this sphere, in this orbit during this time. It's such a joy, and it brings me joy. And all of you who are watching, please continue to support the Buy Black Debt project.
Yeah.
And make sure that you're looking at ways to be in solidarity, to hold space for one another during this time. Have compassion with yourselves. Have compassion with yourselves, which will teach you how to have compassion with others during this moment. Is there anything we should be looking out for that you want us to be excited about and that you're working on, that you're making little magic
so I need y'all help. Okay, so I'm writing a new book. It's a kid's book. It's called The Book of Radical Answers, that I know you already know. It's for kids ages 10 to 14. And I need questions. It is a book where I answer the questions of young people. And so I need your young people's questions. And so you can send them to thebookofradicalanswers.com. And there's a little form where you can submit your question and all of those things. Please, I really want this to be a place where young people can go and see themselves in their vastness, and see themselves reflected in the world that we are creating, right? And to see themselves as co-creators of that world. But I can't do that if I can't think of those questions for those young people. I need them to give them to me. And I don't have the babies. Y'all have the babies. So send me your babies' questions.
How do people send you the questions again?
Say again? How
do they send you the questions again?
You are going to go to thebookofradicalanswers.com and insert a question. The form is on the page. So I hope, thank you. Somebody just put it there. I'm going to pin it. Wait. Come back. Pinning.
Because I have some little kids that might need to do that. Okay. Book of Radical
Please do. 10 to 14. We want you. We need you.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
That's the big and if you're white and you have some money, you can email me about becoming a contributor for Buy Back Black Debt.
I definitely got some debt, so I might need to be on your waiting list to pay that black debt off.
I was going to say, it's a waiting list right now for Black folks. I love y'all. We got about almost 1,000 Black folks to get through. Once we through them, we'll bring on some more. But yeah.
All right. We love you so much, Sonya. Thank you.
Love you. Thank you.
All right, everyone. You heard it here. Please follow Vias for Voices. Follow us on Instagram. We will be having some other incredible guests. We have Rada Black next week on Monday. We're going to be, sharing more and more stories. And we also want to have as many Black women submit as possible. So please, there's a stipend. You get paid if you're chosen. So it's visforvoices.com. Follow us. We'll also be sharing critical Black women who have helped to shape and be the architect of the Black radical imagination over time. So you'll be able to also see just little snippets of archive footage, prompts that we're sharing, different talking points for people to get involved. Thank you, thank you, thank you, everyone, for your love, for your kind energy. I pray that you are loving on each other and lifting each other up during this time. We are all we got. We're the strongest thing that we have in the universe. And that's all in here. It's all in you. So get right with you and everything else to be straight. Have a great rest of your day.